It started not with a bang, but with a smirk, the kind of smirk you get when you know something the other guy doesn't. While Trump was ranting about tariffs, standing in front of cameras and shouting about America First, Carney was calmly reshuffling the economic chessboard. And when the pieces settled, it wasn't Trump's board anymore. Hey everyone, before we dive in, make sure you hit that subscribe button, give this video a like, and tap the notification bell so you don't miss updates that the mainstream media would rather you didn't hear. Now, let's break this down. This isn't just another trade spat. This is the start of something much bigger, a full-blown economic retaliation by Canada. And the man leading the charge isn't even a politician. Carney, former governor of the Bank of England and the Bank of Canada, is showing the world what it looks like when a cool head outsmarts a loud one. Trump thought tariffs were the hammer. But Carney brought the scalpel. Let's rewind a little. After years of heated rhetoric, Trump once again pointed his anger north. In a surprise move, he announced a sweeping set of tariffs on Canadian agricultural imports, especially grains and dairy. He framed it as a win for American farmers, protection from unfair competition. But behind the scenes, Trump's team was already facing internal warnings. Canada was not going to take this lying down. Within hours, Carney was spotted leaving a private economic council meeting in Ottawa. No press conference. No bravado. Just quiet coordination. And what followed looked less like a response and more like a silent economic ambush. Let's talk about potash. Most Americans don't even know what it is. But ask any farmer, and they'll tell you, potash is gold. It's a critical fertilizer ingredient that helps crops grow. And here's the kicker, over 40% of the world's supply comes from Canada, specifically, from the vast mines of Saskatchewan. Now here's what happened. Within days of Trump's tariff announcement, Carney helped broker a deal that rerouted 90% of Canada's potash exports away from the United States. That means American farmers, already struggling with extreme weather and global competition, suddenly faced skyrocketing fertilizer prices. Fields that would have been planted this spring left barren. Trump wanted to protect American farmers. Instead, he just made it more expensive for them to grow food. And Carney wasn't done. Next came energy. Canada, as it turns out, isn't just America's biggest trading partner, it's also one of its biggest energy suppliers. Crude oil, natural gas, hydroelectric power. For decades, those pipelines running south have helped keep American homes warm and factories running. But under Carney's guidance, a new strategy unfolded. Canada ramped up its LNG terminals on the west coast. In British Columbia, port expansions went into overdrive. And guess who signed new supply contracts? Not the US, but Japan, South Korea, and China. Canada was no longer content with being America's backup battery. Now it was selling energy to Asia, at a premium. While Trump stood on podiums shouting about dominance, Carney was locking in 30-year contracts behind closed doors. But it wasn't just about energy or agriculture. This was a full-spectrum economic strike. Steel and aluminum tariffs. Carney responded by targeting American auto imports. Canada is one of the largest buyers of US vehicles and auto parts. And under Carney's direction, Ottawa quietly introduced new regulations that made it more expensive, and slower, for American carmakers to sell north of the border. Within weeks, factories in Michigan and Ohio were seeing cancelled orders. Layoffs followed. Dealerships reported drops in inventory and sales. And the unions? Furious. Not at Canada, but at Trump. Meanwhile, Carney moved in silence. He coordinated with European trade leaders. Held late-night calls with economic advisors in Germany, Japan, and even Brazil. Canada's message was simple: if Trump wants a trade war, we'll build a new economy without him. Back in Washington, panic started to set in. By May, internal memos from the Department of Agriculture were warning that Canadian retaliation could cause long-term damage to the U.S. food supply chain. American grocery prices were already creeping up. And while inflation numbers looked okay on paper, everyday shoppers felt the squeeze, especially in rural states. Wheat flour, corn-based products, and dairy surged. Cereal prices hit record highs. School lunch programs in several southern states reported budget shortfalls. And all of this happened without Canada firing a single shot, just smart trade reallocation and calculated diplomacy. And the media? Well, they barely covered it. While cable news focused on Trump's soundbites and campaign stops, Mark Carney was quietly reshaping trade lanes and redirecting billions in value away from the US. The strategy was devastatingly effective because it was subtle. This wasn't a war of headlines. It was a war of logistics. Trump's inner circle tried to spin it. They claimed Canada was bluffing. That the US could find new partners. But that's easier said than done. When it comes to potash, Canada's mines are unmatched. When it comes to hydroelectric power, their grid is already integrated with ours. And when it comes to clean LNG shipping lanes to Asia, no American port on the Pacific can match what Canada's building in Prince Rupert. In the background, Carney was winning the long game. Slowly, carefully, and with precision. And then came the masterstroke. While Trump was busy antagonizing allies, Carney secured a massive multilateral trade agreement with the European Union, one that gave Canada preferential access to steel, rare earth metals, and green tech components. In exchange, Europe locked out certain US exports. It wasn't flashy. But it was lethal. America suddenly found itself boxed in. On one side, China and India, both building their own supply chains. On the other, Europe, tightening alliances with Canada. And right in the middle, a furious Trump, fuming on social media, blaming everyone but himself. Mark Carney, meanwhile, didn't say a word publicly. He didn't have to. His move spoke louder than Trump's tweets ever could. By summer, American trade economists were quietly meeting with Canadian liaisons, trying to de-escalate. But the damage was already done. Food prices were unstable. Trucking companies were rerouting. Agricultural exports were down. And perhaps most painfully for Trump, American farmers were furious. The Midwest, long seen as Trump country, had had enough. Not only were they not protected by tariffs, they were the ones paying for them. Grain cooperatives in Nebraska and Kansas reported the lowest export numbers in over a decade. Family farms began shuttering. Some shifted to alternative crops, but others simply gave up, unable to afford fertilizer or shipping. And here's the bitter irony: Trump, who rose to power promising to protect the American heartland, had now pushed it to the brink. Mark Carney didn't humiliate him in public. He didn't mock him at rallies or trash him on social media. He just let the numbers speak. Quietly. Calmly. Like a true economist. And as the crisis grew, Trump did what he always does: he looked for someone to blame. First, it was China. Then Mexico. Then the deep state. But by then, it was too late. The markets had already adjusted. Supply chains had already shifted. And Canada. Canada had already won. There's a lesson here, and it's not just about trade. It's about leadership. Trump's approach was brute force, tariffs, threats, and bravado. Carney's was methodical, alliances, leverage, and patience. And in the end, it wasn't the loudest man who won. It was the one with the plan. As 2025 rolls on, analysts are already calling this the quiet decoupling. America, once the hub of North American trade, is watching as its neighbors, and even its own companies, look elsewhere. Canada, under Carney's shadow influence, has positioned itself as a global bridge, linking North America, Europe, and Asia. And what does Trump have? A trade war no one asked for. A rural economy in crisis. And a growing realization that shouting "America first" doesn't work when the rest of the world is already moving on. In the coming months, the effects will deepen. As supply contracts expire and aren't renewed, as farmers shift to domestic-only models, and as factories lay off more workers, the ripple effects of Carney's retaliation will be undeniable. But perhaps the most painful thing for Trump: he'll never admit he lost. Not publicly. Not ever. But the markets know. The farmers know. The world knows. Mark Carney didn't just strike back, he exposed the weakness at the heart of Trump's strategy, that isolation isn't strength, and loud isn't smart. So, what's next? That's the question everyone's asking. But if one thing's clear, it's this: Canada's no longer the quiet neighbor. And Mark Carney? He's no longer just a banker. He's the strategist who just made Trump regret everything. Thanks for watching. If you found this breakdown helpful, hit like, drop a comment, and subscribe for more deep dives into the global shifts shaping our future. Stay alert, and stay informed.